A paranormal romance audiobook. The night Aristarh arrived, the city smelled like cold iron and wet stone. Liana knew that smell the way some people knew perfume. It was the smell of old wards waking up, of gates that had not needed to be closed in decades remembering how to shut. The dark court had been preparing all day, and preparation in her father's house never meant hospitality. It meant choreography. She stood behind the black lattice of the upper gallery and watched the outer yard fill with torchlight. Dark attendants moved like shadows around the basalt steps, straightening banners, polishing the metal rings set into the ground for ceremonial bindings that no one admitted were bindings. They wanted the light ruler to see those rings. They wanted him to understand, politely, that he was a guest, and that guests in the dark city survived by behaving as if they were grateful. Below, her father's courtiers gathered in a crescent, elegant and bored. Their faces held that practiced stillness that made even laughter feel like a threat. They had all heard the same rumor, repeated so many times it had turned from rumor into appetite. Aristarh of the Light Hives had come to beg. Liana did not believe that. She had never met Aristarh, but she had read his letters, the ones carried across the border by neutral runners and copied into the archive. They were careful letters, written by someone who preferred a win without blood. A man like that did not come to beg. He came because he needed something and because he did not want the dark court to know what it was. Behind her, a maid adjusted the fall of Liana's hair and murmured, "Your father says you must be present for the guest rite." Liana kept her eyes on the yard. "I know," the maid hesitated. "He says you must smile." Liana let her lips curve. In the reflection of the gallery window, the smile looked like a small cut. The bells at the outer gate rang once, twice, then fell silent as the wards recognized the blood that approached. A convoy entered. Not a caravan of supplicants, not a parade. A disciplined line of riders in pale cloaks, their mounts shod with quiet metal. At their center rode a man without a cloak, as if he did not need to hide his color. Aristarh did not look like her father's descriptions of light vampires. Damir's stories always painted light as a kind of fragile arrogance, clean and delicate, as if brightness were the same as weakness. But Aristarh's brightness was not delicate. It was controlled. He carried himself as if he knew exactly how much space he was allowed and exactly how much space he could take if he chose. He dismounted and handed the reins to one of his own, not to a dark servant. It was a small defiance, the kind that could be denied if challenged, but it drew a ripple through the court. Prince Damir descended the steps with a slow grace, one hand resting on the pommel of a ceremonial blade he would not use. His smile was wide enough to show his teeth, and in the torchlight the teeth looked like jewelry. "Aristarh," Damir said, loud enough for every courtier to hear. "Light's most patient ruler, you honor us." Aristarh bowed, not deep. "Prince Damir, I thank you for receiving me." Even from the gallery, Liana heard the way the words landed. Not soft, not pleading. A statement. A presence. Damir extended his arms as if inviting an embrace, then held them open too long, forcing Aristarh into a pause where either refusal or acceptance would be read as weakness. It was one of her father's favorite games, the kind played in half seconds. Aristarh solved it by stepping forward and offering his hand instead. Not the full grasp of equals, not the withdrawal of insult. A handshake meant commerce, agreement, negotiation. It did not mean family. It did not mean submission. Damir's eyes narrowed, but he took the hand. their palms met. For an instant, the torches along the yard flickered as if a draft had passed through them. Liana felt it in her own body, a small tightening behind her ribs. It was not hunger. It was not fear. It was anticipation, sharp as a needle. She pressed her fingertips into the railing, grounding herself, and told herself that the sensation was only the wards reacting to two bloodlines in proximity. She was wrong, but she did not know it yet. The formal negotiations were held in the Hall of Salt, an old chamber built when the city still traded through marsh ports and made treaties with humans in ink and coin. Its floor was inlaid with pale stone that glittered faintly, as if salt had been trapped under glass. The ceiling was low for a court hall, designed to make even tall vampires bow their heads. Damir sat on the obsidian chair that served as a throne when he wanted it to. Aristarh sat opposite on a chair brought in for him, plain and sturdy. The distance between them was exactly the length of a spear, a traditional measure from times when peace talks ended badly. Liana remained at her father's right, not seated, a daughter displayed like a seal on a document. She wore black, of course. The light delegation wore shades that made her eyes ache, pale gray and ivory, as if they were daring the dark court to call them weak for refusing to hide. The first hour was theater. Damir spoke of old grievances with a voice made velvet by practice. Aristarh answered with courtesy that did not bend. Courtiers whispered, laughed softly, performed boredom. Scribes scratched symbols into tablets that would later be rewritten into a version of events more useful than truth. Liana watched Aristarh more than she watched her father. When Damir tried to corner him with a question about border raids, Aristarh did not deny, did not confess. He reframed. When Damir tried to insult him with a remark about Light Hives breeding too close to human towns, Aristarh answered with a quiet comment about dark courtships involving too much blood and too little consent. The court hissed. Damir smiled wider. Liana should have enjoyed it. She should have felt loyalty, pride, the thrill of seeing the light ruler tested. Instead, she felt that same needle behind her ribs. When the hall finally adjourned for the night, Damir rose and spoke as if offering generosity. "Before you rest, Aristarh, you will accept the guest ritual," he said, "so that my house may be assured you carry no hidden seal, no poison charm, no binding oath against us." Aristarh's gaze flicked to the inlaid floor, then to Liana, not to Damir. To her, as if he understood something about the ritual that most outsiders did not. In that glance, Liana saw calculation, but not fear. And she saw something else, a brief hardening, as if he recognized a trap and chose to step into it anyway. "I accept," Aristarh said. Damir turned to Liana, and his voice softened into the tone he used when he wanted her to obey without looking like he was ordering her. "Daughter, perform your duty." Liana inclined her head. "Yes, father." The guest ritual was older than the feud between dark and light. It had begun as a practical measure, back when vampire courts feared spies more than they feared each other. The seal stone was kept in a small side chamber, one with no windows and walls lined in lead and salt. The air inside tasted flat, as if it refused to carry scent. Only a handful were allowed to witness. Damir, 2 elder judges, 1 light guard, and Liana. That was all. The fewer the witnesses, the harder it was for anyone to claim later that the ritual had been performed incorrectly. The seal stone sat on a pedestal. It was no larger than a human skull, black and smooth, etched with concentric rings of script. Liana had performed this ritual for minor envoys, for merchants, for human ambassadors whose hands shook as they offered blood. She had never performed it for a ruler. Aristarh removed his glove without hesitation. His hand was strong, the skin unmarked by scar or ornament. He did not carry rings. That was notable. Most vampires did, even if only as symbols. He wore nothing that could be taken from him. Liana took the thin ritual blade from its case. It was silvered, not because silver harmed vampires, but because silver did not hold foreign magic well. The blade was meant to cut, not to bind. "Your palm," she said. Aristarh placed his hand above the seal stone, palm open, relaxed. Liana cut her own thumb first, as tradition demanded. A single bead of blood welled, dark and thick. She held it above the innermost ring and let it fall. The blood struck the stone and spread in a perfect circle, as if the stone drank it and drew it into shape. Then she lifted the blade to Aristarh. For a moment, her hand hesitated, not from squeamishness. Vampires did not flinch at blood. She hesitated because the air between them felt charged, as if the lead-lined chamber had become too small to hold both their presences. Aristarh's eyes met hers. They were lighter than she expected, not pale like milk but like storm glass, reflecting the torchlight without warmth. His face was composed, but his breath had slowed. She heard it barely. "You may," he said. Liana drew the blade across his thumb with a clean motion. Blood welled bright, brighter than hers, as if his blood carried its own inner light. It should have repulsed her. She had been taught that light blood was thin, arrogant, dangerous. Instead, the scent hit her like a sudden memory she could not place. Salt smoke, a winter orchard, something impossibly familiar. Aristarh held his thumb above the stone. The ritual required both drops to fall together. "Now," Liana said, though her voice sounded distant in her own ears. Their blood fell at the same time. The seal stone flared, not with light, not with flame, but with a pressure that squeezed the room as if the walls leaned inward. Liana's heart, which normally beat only when she forced it to, stuttered once. It was a physical jolt, a betrayal of her body. She saw Aristarh's throat move as his own pulse caught. For the smallest fraction of a second, she felt him. Not his mind, not his thoughts, but his existence, like a second rhythm pressed against hers. And the sensation was not neutral. It was not the calm recognition of a successful security rite. It was a bond. True. Her breath stopped. Her fingers tightened around the ritual blade until the metal bit her skin. Across the stone, Aristarh's pupils widened. He did not move, but something in his posture changed, as if an internal balance had shifted. The seal stone's etched rings filled with blood then went still. The pressure eased. Damir leaned forward slightly. "Well," Liana swallowed, forcing her voice to remain even. "The seal recognizes him, no foreign binding." One of the elder judges nodded, satisfied. Aristarh withdrew his hand and pressed his thumb wound with his other fingers. He did not glance at Damir. His gaze stayed on Liana, steady, warning. "Do not show it," his eyes seemed to say. Liana inclined her head in the smallest acknowledgement, the kind a daughter could offer an honored guest. Nothing more. Anything more would be noticed. In the dark court, a moment of softness could be used confirmation of treason. Damir stood. "Then we may continue our discussions tomorrow. You will be given rooms in the east wing. Guards will be posted for your comfort." "For my comfort," Aristarh repeated, polite, and if there was irony in it, he buried it well. As the small procession exited the lead-line chamber, Liana forced herself to walk at a normal pace. She did not look at Aristarh again. She did not look at her father. She kept her expression neutral, her blood cold, her body under control. But inside, the rhythm remained. A second pulse. A thread pulled tight between 2 points that should never have been connected. That night, Liana did not sleep. She sat in her rooms, the windows shuttered, the candles low. She pressed her palm to her chest and tried to slow the unwanted beat. The true bond was supposed to be myth, a story told to make young vampires fear desire. A bond that could not be broken, a connection that made lies painful and betrayal deadly, that turned politics into personal disaster. If it was real, it meant one thing above all. Someone would try to use it. She rose, paced, then stopped when a tremor ran through the house. It was subtle, like distant thunder. The wards shifted. A messenger's footsteps pounded down the corridor outside, faster than etiquette allowed. Then came the ringing of the outer alarms, not the welcoming bells from earlier, but a harsher sound that made the bones in the walls respond. Liana pulled on a cloak and stepped into the hall. Servants scattered like startled birds. A guard, face pale even for a vampire, ran past her without bowing. "What is it?" she demanded. He halted, recognizing her too late, and snapped into a stiff bow. "My lady, we have reports, disappearances." "Humans?" "No, ours, low ranks from the South Warrens, taken, and light scouts near the canal gate, also taken." Liana's skin tightened. "Taken how?" The guard swallowed. "No blood, no bodies, just emptiness. Like they stepped into a door that was not there." Liana moved quickly through the corridors toward the watch balcony that overlooked the lower city. From there, she saw lantern clusters moving through alleys, heard distant shouts. The city below did not burn. There was no riot, no massacre. Instead, there was the sickening silence of missing persons, the kind of silence that made everyone glance at everyone else. Damir appeared beside her, cloak thrown over his shoulders, hair unbound. He looked almost alive in the turmoil, alert and hungry for advantage. "Light treachery," one courtier hissed. "An insult," another said. "They come to negotiate and slaughter our young." Damir listened, letting their anger warm him. He did not yet commit. He enjoyed uncertainty. It let him shape the next wave. Aristarh arrived moments later, moving with his guards, expression controlled. He looked toward the city and then toward Damir. "This is not my doing," Aristarh said quietly. Damir's smile returned. "Of course, then it must be mine." Liana watched Aristarh's jaw tighten just slightly. The true bond thread inside her vibrated as if in response. She hated it. She hated that her body reacted to him like a tuning fork. Aristarh spoke again, measured. "If your low ranks and my low ranks vanish the same night with no blood spilled, then we have a third force." Damir's eyes narrowed. "Hunters," he said, and the word carried contempt. Vampires did not often fear humans, but they respected humans with knowledge. There were old orders that did not fight with strength, but with chemistry, ritual, and patience. Liana leaned forward, watching the lanterns below. The disappearances were too clean. Even the most careful vampire left traces. A smear of scent, a scrape on stone, a drip of blood. This felt like someone had learned how to erase the trail. "Where?" Aristarh asked. "South Warren's Canal Gate," Damir replied, voice sharpening. "And now reports from the salt market." Aristarh turned to one of his guards. "Double the perimeter. No one moves alone, no feeding without witness." Damir's courtiers laughed at the command, but Aristarh's guard obeyed without hesitation. A ruler who could enforce discipline was dangerous. Damir looked at Aristarh, and the air between them became brittle. You see the problem, Damir said. My city is already suspicious of your presence. If this continues, no one will care whether you are innocent. I am aware, Aristarh said. Damir's gaze flicked to Liana, and in that glance, Liana understood what her father was about to do before he did it. Damir did not waste chaos. He turned chaos into leverage. In the morning, Damir announced, voice carrying down the hall to the gathered court, we will calm the city. We will show them a bond stronger than rumor, a guarantee of peace. Murmurs rose. Damir placed his hand on Liana's shoulder, possessive. My daughter will be formally promised to Aristarh. Nominally, temporarily, as a shield against misunderstanding. Silence, then a sharp intake of breaths. Liana's mind went cold. Father, she began, but the word came out too soft. Aristarh's head turned sharply. For the first time since the ritual, his composure cracked. The thread inside Liana tightened painfully as if her own body flinched with him. Damir smiled at Aristarh, satisfied. You need time, light ruler. I need calm. Let us trade. Aristarh's eyes met Liana's, and she saw a flash of apology that made her anger burn hotter. He did not want this. She believed that in the instant, but he might accept it anyway because he, too, was trapped. Agreed, Aristarh said, and the word fell like a stone. The next day, the announcement was made from the balcony above the central square. Dark citizens gathered below in a restless sea, faces lifted, eyes bright with suspicion. Light guards stood in a separate cluster, pale cloaks stark against the soot-colored buildings. Damir stood at the balcony rail, arms spread. Liana stood at his side. Aristarh stood 2 paces away, the distance careful, as if proximity might set the air on fire. My people, Damir called, voice rich. We face a threat from outside, a cowardly force that steals our young and seeks to pit us against our neighbors. We will not be baited, we will show them unity. He gestured, and Liana felt as if her bones became part of the performance. My daughter, Liana, will enter a betrothal with Aristarh of the Light Hives, not as surrender, as treaty, as proof that we will answer any third hand with both fists. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, hungry for spectacle. Some hissed, outraged at the thought of dark blood mixed with light. Some shouted questions about honor, about tradition, about what it meant for the succession. Liana's mouth was dry. She did not look at the crowd. She looked at Aristarh because the bond made it impossible not to feel him. His face was composed again. But she saw the tension at the corner of his eyes, the way he kept his hands still as if any movement might betray emotion. Damir leaned close to Liana and murmured without moving his lips. You will smile. The city needs to see you obedient. Liana smiled. She hated herself for it. After the balcony, the court descended into a frenzy of planning. There were contracts to draft, rituals to schedule, rumors to manage. The Dark Elders argued about which old laws applied. Light advisors demanded guarantees of safety. Damir enjoyed it all, as if he had thrown a bone into a kennel and watched the dogs fight over it. Liana moved through the commotion like a ghost. She made it to a quiet corridor and then, without telling anyone, left the palace through a servant passage that opened onto a narrow alley. She went to see Mavra. The witch lived in a crooked house wedged between an abandoned chapel and a tannery. The air around it tasted of ash and dried herbs. Humans avoided the street, not because they knew what Mavra was, but because their instincts disliked places where reality sat too loosely. Liana knocked once and did not wait. The door opened on its own. Inside, the house was warmer than it should have been. Candles burned without smoke. Shelves held jars of powders and bones and pressed flowers. Mavra sat at a table, hands folded, as if she had been waiting. "You are late," the witch said. "I did not know I was coming until I arrived," Liana replied, keeping her voice firm. Mavra's eyes flicked over her, lingering on her throat, her wrists, the subtle places where a bond might show itself. "Ah, that is why." Liana remained standing. "I need concealment." Mavra tilted her head. "You are promised to the Light Ruler. Do you want to break the promise already?" "I do not want to break anything," Liana said, and the truth of it surprised her. The bond was there, yes, but her goal was not romance or escape. Her goal was survival. "I need to hide what cannot be allowed to show. The reactions, the involuntary tells." Mavra's smile was thin. "You speak of true bond signs." Liana's fingers curled in her cloak. "If you say that word louder, you will die." Mavra's smile did not change. "Threats are currency for fools. Tell me what you will pay." Liana hesitated. In the dark court, everything had a price, but witches named prices differently. They did not want gold. They wanted pieces that did not grow back. "What do you want?" Liana asked. Mavra leaned forward. "Your first touch." Liana stared. "What does that mean?" Mavra's voice softened, almost kind, which was always more dangerous than cruelty. "The first moment your skin met his, when the bond sparked. The first imprint. I can blur the signs, weave a veil around your pulse and scent, but the veil must anchor to something. I will take the memory of that first contact and lock it away. You will remember the facts, perhaps, that it happened, but you will not be able to replay it. It will not betray you in dreams. It will not rise to your face when someone asks." Liana's stomach tightened. Her mind reached for the memory and found it already painful to hold, like a bright object too hot to grasp. Aristarh's hand on Damir's hand, the torches flickering, the tightening behind her ribs. Then the chamber, the drops of blood falling together. The first touch. It was strange to realize that the thing she might lose was not sentimental. It was evidence. It was a weak point someone could exploit. "Do it," Liana said. Mavra rose and moved around the table. She drew a circle of salt on the floor with quick, precise movements. She placed a small black bowl at its center and motioned Liana inside the circle. "Hold out your hand," Mavra instructed. Liana did. Mavra pricked her fingertip with a needle that smelled faintly of nightshade. Liana's blood welled and Mavra caught it in the bowl. "Speak the moment you want hidden," Mavra said. Liana's throat tightened. "I do not want to speak it." "You must name it," Mavra replied. "Memory is a beast. It does not leave unless called." Liana closed her eyes. She forced the words out, describing the seal stone, the blood drops, the stutter of her heart. She described Aristarh's eyes meeting hers in that lead-lined room. She described the sensation like a second rhythm. Her voice remained steady until the end, and then it cracked once, betraying more than she wanted to admit. Mavra murmured in an old language, one that sounded like gravel underwater. The air thickened. The candle flames bent inward. Liana felt a tug behind her eyes, like a hand reaching into her skull. Then the tug became a pull. For a heartbeat, she panicked because it felt like drowning. She tried to grab the memory, to hold onto it, and found that her mind slid off it as if it had been coated in oil. The image of the seal stone remained, but the emotional imprint, the visceral spark, began to fade. When Mavra spoke the final syllable, the bowl of blood darkened as if it had absorbed shadow. "It is done," Mavra said. Liana opened her eyes. The room looked the same, but something inside her was missing, a small bright thorn removed from under the skin. She could still say what had happened, but when she tried to feel it, there was only a blank spot, like a page torn from a book. What is the cost beyond that? Liana asked, suspicious. Mavra's gaze sharpened. All costs have echoes. Your memory is not destroyed. It is stored, sealed. A seal can be broken. By who? Mavra shrugged. By time, by hunger. By those who collect memories the way others collect blood. Liana stiffened. Is that a warning? It is a fact, Mavra replied. Leave before your father's spies notice you are gone. Liana turned toward the door, then paused. If the bond is true, she said, forcing herself to speak calmly, can it be used against me? Mavra's voice came from behind her, quiet. Everything true can be used. When Liana returned to the palace, no one mentioned her absence. That meant her father had noticed and chosen not to acknowledge it, which was worse than being confronted. Damir always stored information for later. That evening, Liana found Aristarh alone in a small courtyard garden, one of the few places in the palace where living plants grew. The garden was enclosed by high walls and warmed by hidden vents. Pale flowers bloomed in winter, stubborn and expensive. Aristarh stood near a fountain that did not run. He watched the water basin as if he expected it to speak. Liana approached without announcing herself. You accepted quickly. He did not startle. Your father left me no room. There is always room, Liana said, even if it is only enough for a knife. Aristarh turned then, fully facing her. If I had refused, your court would have taken it as proof that I came here with an insult. They would have demanded blood to cleanse it. Your father would have given them a scapegoat, and it would not have been him. Liana's lips tightened. And if you accept, I become the shield. Yes, Aristarh said, and he did not soften the truth. And you become the point where both sides can focus their anger without admitting they are afraid of a third force. Liana studied him. Mavra's veil was supposed to hide her bond signs, but it did nothing to hide the fact that she could feel him like weather. His presence pressed against her senses, steady and infuriating. You came here for time, she said, not a question. Aristarh's eyes narrowed slightly. What makes you think that? The way you move, Liana answered. You are not here to win, you are here to delay. Aristarh held her gaze. Yes, he exhaled slowly. My hive is close to revolt. There are elders who believe I have been too patient with dark raids, too willing to negotiate. If I return home without a visible gain, they will replace me. Liana felt the bond thread vibrate, not with sympathy, but with recognition. This was the kind of weakness that did not look like weakness until it killed you. So you use my father's performance as your gain, she said. Aristarh's jaw tightened. If I can bring home a treaty that looks like dominance, I buy time. Time to find who is stealing our low ranks. Time to stop the elders from making war. Liana laughed once without humor. So we are both shields. How noble. Aristarh's gaze flicked to her hands. You are shaking. Liana looked down and realized with cold irritation that her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, from the bond, from the proximity, from the fact that her body reacted to him despite her will. She curled her hands into fists. Do not comment on my body. Aristarh's voice softened. I did not mean to insult you. Then do not mean, Liana replied. Act. Aristarh's mouth tightened as if he wanted to say something else, something personal, but he swallowed it. We need a place to work, he said instead. A place not watched by your father and not controlled by my elders. If a third force is taking ours, we cannot solve it inside either court. Liana's mind moved quickly. There was one place, a forgotten holding from older times, technically outside the city's main ward ring, sitting on salt marshes where law became ambiguous. "There is a fort," she said. "Neutral, old, it belongs to me by a legal quirk, my mother's dowry, few remember it exists." Aristarh's eyes sharpened. "Can I enter?" Liana nodded once. "Only by invitation. That is the rule written into the deed. Even my father must be invited." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then respect. "Then invite me?" Liana stared at him. "You ask too easily." Aristarh's gaze held steady. "I ask because we are already bound in the eyes of the city. If we do nothing, the third force will keep taking our low ranks until panic makes the courts demand war. If we act, we may find proof. Proof can be used." Liana felt that needle behind her ribs again, but dulled as if Mavra's veil wrapped it in cloth. The bond did not vanish. It simply stopped screaming. "Fine," Liana said, "but understand this. Inside my fort, you will follow my rules." Aristarh inclined his head. "Agreed." Liana hesitated, then spoke the invitation as if it were a legal clause, not a personal act. "Aristarh of the Light Hives, you are invited to enter my fort on the salt marshes, under my authority, for the purpose of investigation and mutual defense." As soon as the words left her mouth, the air shifted. Not dramatically, but enough that Liana felt the fort, far away, recognize the invitation like a lock turning. Aristarh's eyes darkened, and for an instant the bond thread pulled tight, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with politics. Liana hated that too. They left separately to avoid gossip, but by midnight, Liana rode out with a small escort, cloaked and silent. Aristarh followed an hour later with 2 guards, taking a different route. In the marshlands, the wind carried their scents away quickly, and the stars were hidden behind low clouds. The fort emerged from the fog like a broken tooth. Its walls were stone blocks crusted with salt, its watchtower half collapsed. Once it had guarded trade routes. Now it guarded nothing but emptiness. Yet when Liana approached, she felt the wards old and stubborn. Her mother's blood had been pressed into these stones. Her name, her claim, her rule. She stepped inside first, crossing the threshold. The air inside tasted of brine and rust. She walked through the courtyard and placed her palm against the central pillar where the deed seal had been carved into the stone. The pillar warmed beneath her hand, recognizing her. When Aristarh arrived, he halted at the threshold. Even a ruler waited when invitation law was involved. It was not superstition. Vampire thresholds were contracts, and contracts were power. Liana stood a few paces inside, cloak snapping in the wind. "You are invited," she said again, simpler now. "Enter." Aristarh crossed. The wards shifted as he passed, testing him, then accepting. Liana felt it like a pressure along her skin, as if the fort itself took a breath. Inside, they moved with efficiency, not romance. They checked walls, repaired a broken gate chain, set lanterns that burned with treated oil to resist wind. Aristarh's guards posted on the tower remnant. Liana's 2 sentries watched the marsh approach. Then they began the work. They questioned witnesses, starting with the only living person who had seen one of the disappearances clearly. A low-rank dark vampire named Sava had survived because he had been dragging a body, too heavy to vanish quickly. He sat on a bench in the fort's main room, wrists bound not with chains, but with a simple cord that marked him as under protection rather than under arrest. Liana sat across from him. Aristarh stood to her left, arms folded, watching. Sava licked his lips nervously. It was not light, he said, speaking fast. I know what light feels like when it hunts. This was different. What did you feel? Liana asked. Sava swallowed. Nothing, that is the horror. There should be something. A scent, a pressure, a sound, but it was like stepping into a place where all sound is eaten. My friend reached for me and then he was gone. The air snapped shut where he had been. Aristarh's voice was calm. Were there marks, powder, glass, anything on the ground? Sava shook his head. Clean. Too clean, like rain washed it, but there was no rain. Liana's mind raced. Hunters and alchemists were rumored to use salts and solvents that erased scent and blood residue, but making a vampire vanish without a struggle required more than chemistry. It required a ritual, a doorway, something that bypassed the body's reflexes. She asked, "Did you see anyone?" Sava hesitated. A hood, a mask maybe, and a smell faint, like bitter metal and herbs. Mavra's shop smell. Not exactly, but close enough that Liana's spine tightened. Aristarh's gaze flicked toward her as if he sensed her reaction. The bond thread hummed, subtle but present. Liana forced her face to remain neutral. Thank you, she told Sava. You will be kept safe tonight. When Sava was led away, Aristarh spoke quietly. You recognized the scent. I recognized a category, Liana replied. Witchcraft. Alchemy, Liana corrected. Witches leave fingerprints. Alchemists erase them. Aristarh studied her. You do not trust witches. I do not trust anyone who sells concealment, Liana said, and heard the irony in her own words too late. Aristarh did not press. Instead, he turned toward the fort's central pillar and ran his fingers over the carved seal lines. Your fort is old, he said. Old wards have old loopholes. Liana's eyes narrowed. Explain. Invitation law, Aristarh said. It protects you from entry. But if someone else learned to mimic your voice, your blood, your authority, they could invite themselves. Liana felt cold. No one can mimic my blood. Aristarh's gaze held steady. Not perfectly, but alchemists can fake many things long enough to open a door. The fog outside thickened. The fort's lantern light became a small island in a gray sea. That night, they did not sleep. They patrolled in shifts, checked the threshold, tested the wards with small, controlled spells. Liana found herself watching Aristarh's hands when he worked. He had the precise movements of someone used to managing systems. He did not waste motion. He did not posture. At one point, he spoke without looking up. Your court believes I came to kill you. Liana's throat tightened. Did you? Aristarh paused. His eyes lifted to hers. For a heartbeat, the bond thread tightened, and Liana felt the question as if it were more than words. No, Aristarh said. I came to buy time. Liana studied his face for deception. She found none, but she knew that truth could be curated. She also knew that true bonds, if real, punished lies. And yet, after Mavra's veil, she could not fully read herself. Her own tells were muted. She said, if you lie to me, you will pay. Aristarh's expression did not change. We all pay. Those words should have been meaningless, but they sat oddly as if he spoke from experience. Liana filed it away. On the second night, they captured one of the intruders. It happened near the eastern marsh line, where the fog thinned and the ground became treacherous with salt pools. Liana was walking the perimeter when she sensed movement that did not match animal patterns. She signaled, and Aristarh appeared beside her, silent as the fog. They saw a figure crouched near a broken stone marker, hands working with something that glittered faintly. Powder. Seals. Liana moved first, fast, closing the distance. The figure reacted with trained speed, throwing a small vial that burst midair. A cloud of pale dust spread, stinging the senses, numbing scent. Aristarh cut through it with a sharp motion of his hand, pushing air aside as if it were fabric. The dust dispersed, and the figure tried to run. Liana caught them by the cloak, yanking them backward. The hood fell, revealing a mask made of treated leather with thin glass lenses. Human-made. Under it, the face was pale but not vampire pale. Human. The humans struggled, reaching for a hidden knife, but Aristarh pinned their wrist with a grip that would have snapped bone if he wanted. His control was absolute. Liana's hunger rose reflexively at the scent of warm blood, but she pushed it down. This was a prisoner, evidence leverage. They dragged the human into the fort and bound them to a chair with iron bands etched with ward script. The human spat, then laughed, a short, brittle sound. "You think you caught something," the human said. "You caught bait." Liana leaned close. "Who are you?" The human's eyes gleamed behind the lenses. "Someone who knows your courts are rotten." Aristarh's voice was quiet. "Tell us how you make vampires vanish." The human smiled. "You would like that, your brightness." Liana's eyes narrowed. "You know him?" The human tilted their head. "We know all rulers. We learn their habits, their hungers, their lies." The word lies landed like a small stone dropped into a well. The bond thread inside Liana vibrated, and she saw Aristarh's throat move again, a subtle sign of discomfort. Liana watched him closely. "You have lied," she said to Aristarh, not accusing, testing. Aristarh met her gaze. "Not to you." But the human laughed again. "Not yet." They interrogated the prisoner for hours. The human gave little. They claimed to belong to an order that served balance, that removed vampires before vampires could remove humans. They spoke of alchemical gates, of solvent salts that stripped wards from stone, of blood distillations that could mimic authority. But when Liana pressed for names, the human only smiled and said, "Look inward, your enemy wears your face." By dawn, the prisoner bit down on something hidden under their tongue and convulsed. Foaming, eyes rolling back, body going rigid. Poison. Liana lunged, prying at their jaw, but it was too late. The human died with a final shudder, leaving behind only a faint bitter scent and a sense of being mocked. Aristarh stared at the corpse, jaw tight. "They came prepared to die." "Of course they did," Liana said. "That is why they can do this. They treat death as a tool." She thought of her father and his court, who treated others as tools. She thought of light elders who treated revolt as leverage. She thought of herself, standing between, pretending she was not already a tool. On the third day, a messenger arrived from the light side, cloak torn, eyes wild. He carried a small seal token, proof he had authority to speak. He bowed low to Aristarh. "My lord, the elders are moving. They say you have been softened by dark luxuries. They gather in council. There is talk of replacing you." Aristarh's face did not change, but the bond thread inside Liana tightened as if in response to a sudden internal strain. "What of the disappearances?" Aristarh asked. "Worse," the messenger said. 2 more low ranks gone, and someone spread word that dark agents are inside our hive tunnels. Liana exhaled slowly. The third force was working faster now, using fear as fuel. Aristarh dismissed the messenger, then stood very still, as if listening to something only he could hear. Perhaps he was listening to the collective instincts of a hive, the murmuring pressure of many minds aligned by blood law. Light vampires were rumored to have stronger hive cohesion than dark courts. If that cohesion turned against their ruler, it would become a weapon. Liana watched him. "You are losing time." "Yes," Aristarh said. Which is why I came. And my father's betrothal gives you cover, Liana said. It gives me a visible gain, Aristarh corrected. Enough to delay their hand, perhaps. Liana's mouth tightened. Perhaps is not enough. Aristarh looked at her then, and for a moment the composure slipped. She saw exhaustion, not physical but strategic. The weight of holding a structure together while enemies pushed from all sides. I need a move they cannot predict, he said. Liana's mind turned. What move? Aristarh's eyes hardened. A disappearance. Liana stared. Do not speak in riddles. Aristarh's voice remained calm. If the elders believe I am dead, they will stop trying to replace me and start fighting each other for succession. That chaos could buy more time than any treaty. Liana's stomach dropped. And what happens to me? Aristarh's gaze held hers. You become the easiest story, the dark princess who killed the light ruler, or the dark princess whose existence caused his death. You will be a convenient spark. Liana felt cold fury rise. So you will use me as your martyr's villain. Aristarh's jaw clenched. I will not let them harm you. You cannot control them if you are dead, Liana snapped. Not dead, Aristarh said, and there was something in his tone that made the words heavier. Hidden. Liana's pulse thudded, unwelcome. The bond thread pulled tight. You plan to fake your death, she realized. Aristarh did not deny it. It is the only way I can cut the elders off from their narrative. If I simply refuse them, they move openly. If I vanish, they scramble. Liana paced once, then stopped. My father will seize the moment. He will call it proof of light weakness. He will, Aristarh agreed, but he will also fear being blamed, which means he will want to control you even more. Liana looked at the fort walls, crusted with salt, as if they could offer an answer. This place felt safe only because it was forgotten. Once Aristarh vanished, nothing would be forgotten. Everything would be hunted. You are playing with a blade near my throat, Liana said. Aristarh's gaze did not waver. Yes, and I hate it. Hatred, Liana thought, was easy to claim. It cost nothing. But then she remembered the way he had restrained his strength with the human prisoner, the way he had insisted on witnesses for feeding, the way he had spoken of systems and loopholes rather than glory. He was not her father. That did not make him good. It made him different. Do it, Liana said, surprising herself. But if you do it, you will owe me more than promises. Aristarh inclined his head once. Name it. Liana considered. She wanted safety, but safety was temporary. She wanted leverage, but leverage could be stolen. What she wanted most dangerously was truth, because truth was the only thing that could cut through theater. No more unknown moves, Liana said. If you plan something that will put me in danger, you tell me first. Aristarh hesitated, just a fraction. Then he nodded. Agreed. The fort's air felt tense, as if the walls listened. Liana wondered if the bond had heard the agreement too, had recorded it somewhere deeper than law. They returned to the palace separately again. Aristarh carried the plan like a concealed blade. Liana carried her own dread like a second cloak. Aristarh's death, when it came, was a perfect piece of theater. It happened on the road back toward the light border, in a narrow ravine where the stone walls rose close enough to block moonlight. The official story, spread by panicked messengers, was that dark assassins had attacked the light convoy. Aristarh had fought, had protected his guards, had fallen into the ravine waters, and his body had been carried away by the current. The Dark Court's version of the story was more poetic. They said the light ruler's brightness had finally met darkness and been swallowed. Liana heard the news in the Hall of Salt, surrounded by courtiers who watched her face the way scavengers watched a wound. Damir sat on his obsidian chair, expression carefully composed. He did not look surprised. He looked pleased in the way a man looked pleased when a rival stumbled. "My daughter," Damir said softly, for the ears of the room, "how tragic. You were almost promised into light. Now you are spared." Liana stared at him. "Spared?" Damir's eyes glittered. "The city will be restless. They will want someone to blame. We will give them the truth." Liana felt ice in her veins. "And what truth is that?" Damir leaned back. "That the light cannot be trusted, that they came here with weakness in their bones. That our enemies, human or vampire, will see us divided and try to strike. Therefore, we will tighten our grip." Liana understood then. Aristarh's plan might buy him time in his hive, but it would cost her stability in hers. Damir would not mourn Aristarh. He would use him. And in the Light Hive, someone would use Liana, because she was the visible connection. The convenient story. The Dark Princess who had been publicly tied to the Light Ruler days before his death. Liana's throat tightened, not with grief but with rage. She wanted to scream that Aristarh was alive, that the story was a lie, that the courts were dancing to strings pulled by a third force. She could not. If she revealed that Aristarh lived, she would expose herself as collaborator. If she stayed silent, she would be shaped into whatever narrative Damir needed. She kept her face still. "What do you require of me, father?" Damir smiled, satisfied by her restraint. "Obedience, visibility. You will appear at my side for the next week. You will show the city that we are unshaken, and you will remain within the palace." A cage, gilded by duty, Liana bowed her head. "As you wish." As soon as the hall dismissed, she went to her rooms and locked the door. She pressed her palm to her chest, searching for the second rhythm, the thread that had been constant since the ritual. It was still there, not a full presence, not a mind. But a pull, faint and stubborn, like a tide that did not care what stories the shore told itself. Aristarh lived. And somewhere beyond the palace, forces moved that did not care about the difference between dark and light. They cared about removing pieces from the board until the board itself collapsed. On the fourth night after Aristarh's death was announced, Liana's window ward trembled. A small signal, 3 pulses, the code she had built into the fort invitation law when she was younger and paranoid. Only someone who had stood with her at the fort pillar would know it. Her breath caught. She opened the window without calling for guards. The fog outside was thick, but she saw a shadow detach from it, stepping onto the balcony with the ease of someone who belonged there. Aristarh. He looked different in the dim light. Not injured, not weakened, but stripped of ceremony. No cloak, no insignia. His hair slightly damp, as if he had indeed been in water. His eyes caught the candlelight and reflected it without warmth. Liana did not move toward him. "You are either very brave," she said, voice low, "or very stupid." Aristarh's mouth curved faintly. "Both at times. You said you would not make unknown moves," Liana hissed. "You did not tell me when." "I could not," Aristarh replied. "Too many ears, even your walls listen." Liana's anger flared, but the bond thread tightened with relief she refused to admit. "My father is keeping me visible," she said. "I am watched." "I know," Aristarh said. "That is why I came, not to comfort you, to warn you." Liana's eyes narrowed. "Warn me of what?" Aristarh stepped closer, careful, stopping short of touching her. "The elders have appointed a regent. He will declare me dead officially, and he will seek a clean enemy to unify the hive. You are that enemy." Liana swallowed. And in my court, my father will use your death to tighten control. Aristarh nodded once. Yes, Liana's mind raced. Then we need proof of the third force, something undeniable. We do, Aristarh agreed, and we need to survive long enough to use it. Outside, the palace guards changed shift. Their footsteps echoed in the corridor beyond Liana's door. Liana stared at Aristarh, at the thin line between them that could not be crossed without consequence. The court will call a hearing, she said. My father will want a public judgment. He will need to name a culprit for the disappearances, for your death, for everything. Aristarh's eyes sharpened. A blood court. A court of blood, Liana confirmed, and the words tasted like rust. A public procedure where truth is supposed to be forced out by oath and pain. Aristarh's gaze held hers steady. Then that is where we will fight. Liana's jaw tightened. That is where we will be torn apart. Aristarh's voice remained calm. Not if we choose the fracture. Liana did not like the sound of that. It sounded like the kind of choice that sacrificed someone. Before she could respond, Aristarh lifted a hand, palm outward, as if swearing an oath without speaking it. I will not let them take you, he said. Liana wanted to believe him. She also wanted to remind him that vows were cheap and survival was not. Instead, she said, Get out, before my father's wards realize you are here. Aristarh hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, something that might have been personal if either of them allowed it. Then he nodded and stepped back into the fog. Liana closed the window and leaned her forehead against the cold glass. Her memory of their first bond spark was gone, sealed away by Mavra, but the bond itself remained, humming under her skin like a restrained storm. The next morning, Prince Damir announced the Court of Blood. He did it with the same voice he used for celebrations. My people, he said from the balcony, we will no longer tolerate shadows stealing our young and poisoning our alliances. We will gather the elders of dark and light, and we will name the guilty. We will cleanse our city with truth. In the square below, the crowd roared, hungry for certainty. Liana stood beside her father, expression composed, and felt the invisible board tighten around her, because she knew what the Court of Blood truly was. It was not a search for truth. It was a machine designed to produce a name the crowd could consume. And if a third force had been planting evidence, the machine would produce exactly what the third force wanted. That night, as preparations began and messengers ran between courts, Liana returned to the neutral fort in secret, using old tunnels that only she and a few trusted guards knew. Aristarh was already there, waiting in the main room, maps spread on the table. They spoke in clipped phrases, like soldiers, not lovers. They outlined who would attend the court, which judges could be bribed, which elders hungered for war. They listed the missing low ranks, their last known locations, the patterns in time and place. Each time they moved too close across the table, the bond thread tightened. Each time their eyes met for too long, the air grew heavy. Mavra's veil kept Liana's pulse from betraying her, but it did not remove the fact that her body wanted to recognize him, to lean in, to treat proximity as relief. She did not allow it. Aristarh pointed to a canal junction on the map. The disappearances cluster near old salt drains, the kind that run under both city and border. Smuggling routes, Liana said. Yes, Aristarh replied. And under the Hall of Salt there is an access. I found it in old Light archives. Your city was once mapped by our surveyors. Liana's eyes narrowed. You have our maps. We have copies, Aristarh said. Old ones. Liana exhaled slowly. Then the third force could be using those drains to move prisoners unseen. And to plant evidence, Aristarh added. Liana's gaze hardened. At the court of blood, they will bring forward a culprit. Aristar's voice was quiet. They will demand one. Liana leaned forward. Then we must decide who they will demand. The words hung between them. The implication was ugly. Choosing a scapegoat could save Liana. It could stabilize Aristar's hive. It could also destroy an innocent or sacrifice someone strategically selected to survive. Aristarh met her eyes. I have someone. Liana's stomach tightened. Someone you are willing to trade. Aristarh did not flinch. Someone who can endure. Someone who understands the cost of keeping a hive from tearing itself apart. Liana stared at him, suddenly seeing the edge under his controlled brightness. He was not her father, but he was still a ruler. And rulers always, eventually, reached the point where people became pieces. Outside the fort, the marsh wind rose, rattling the shutters. In the city, preparations for the court of blood continued, and the crowd sharpened its appetite for a name. Liana straightened, forcing her voice steady. If you do this, she said, and you treat lives like coins, I will not be your shield, I will be your enemy. Aristar's gaze held hers. I understand. But the bond thread did not loosen. It remained, stubborn, binding them to the same coming disaster whether they wanted it or not. They left the fort before dawn, separate again, carrying their plans like hidden blades toward a court that claimed to serve truth and in fact served hunger. And somewhere beneath the city, in salt drains that remembered older wars, the third force waited with clean hands and prepared proofs. The hall sat beneath the hall of salt, down a spiral stair lined with old iron sconces. Its stone seats rose in hard tiers around a circular floor of pale inlay that looked like a dried lake. At the center stood a low platform with a drain cut into it, so that any blood spilled would not pool, would not stain, would simply vanish into the city's bones. The drain was the most honest thing in the room. Liana entered with her father and felt the air change as hundreds of eyes found her. Vampires did not fidget the way humans did, but they reacted all the same. A slight lean, a sharpened focus, the almost invisible turn of heads. Every glance asked the same question in different words. Is she the reason? Damir walked as if the stone itself belonged to him. He took the high seat carved from black basalt and laid his hands on the armrests with deliberate calm. The elder judges filed in behind him. Their faces were old enough that their expressions looked carved too, as if emotion had been worn off by centuries of verdicts. On the opposite side of the circle, the light delegation arrived with a smaller escort than politics would normally demand. Their leader was not Aristarh. It was the regent, a tall light vampire with hair pulled tight at the nape and eyes that did not reflect torchlight so much as absorb it. Regent Curson bowed to Damir, not too deep, then to the judges, and finally to Liana with the faintest pause that felt like a measurement. Damir spoke first, voice carrying without strain. He did not need to shout. The room was built to amplify him. We gather to name the force that steals our young. We gather to cleanse this city. We gather to prove that dark law is not weakness and light grief is not excuse. He let the words settle, then turned his head slightly toward the regent. Your ruler died under my sky, he said. I offered peace, and death answered. If your people seek accusation, let them bring proof. If my people seek blame, let them bring proof. Tonight we are not animals. Tonight we are a court. Liana heard the lie in the phrasing. The court was not there to resist animal instincts. It was there to dress them. Regent Curson stepped forward. His voice was smooth and controlled. My Lord Aristarh is dead. His loss is a wound. Our hive will not pretend otherwise. But we also will not accept insult disguised as condolence. We have reason to believe dark hands reached for him. A murmur rose from the seats, dark and light hissing in different directions. Damir smiled as if he enjoyed the sound of anger. Bring your reasons, Damir said. The regent gestured, and 2 light guards led a bound figure onto the central platform. The prisoner was not light. The scent of him hit Liana before she could parse details. Dark blood. Low rank. Terrified. The prisoner's head was shaved, his wrists bound in iron, his mouth raw as if he had tried to chew through a gag. This one was taken near the ravine where our lord fell, the regent said. He carries dark scent, dark markings. He was found with a vial of solvent salts and a strip of treated leather, the kind used by hunters to mask scent. Hunters, Liana thought, the third force. The regent was pulling them into the narrative and pinning them onto dark flesh. Damir leaned forward, eyes bright. Interesting. A dark low rank with hunter tools. That would suggest a traitor among my people, or a planted mask. Regent Curson did not blink. We will hear his blood oath. The elder judges signaled. A dark priest stepped to the platform with a shallow bowl and a thin blade. The prisoner shook, tried to pull away, but iron held him. Liana understood the mechanism. Blood oath in the court of blood did not mean truth in the human sense. It meant pain as leverage, and pain made even vampires say whatever would end it. The blade cut. The priest caught blood, then pressed his thumb into it and drew a symbol on the prisoner's brow. The symbol glimmered faintly. An oath seal. Speak, the priest said. Tell the court who hired you. Tell the court who sent you to the ravine. The prisoner's lips trembled. His eyes darted to Damir, then to Liana, then to the Light Regent as if searching for mercy and finding none. I was told, he rasped. I was told to wait, to mark the route, to throw the dust. By whom, the priest asked. The prisoner swallowed, and Liana watched the way his throat moved, the way his fear shaped his body. Then his gaze landed on Liana and stuck there, not because he knew her, because someone had instructed him where to look when the time came. By the princess, he said, the room inhaled as a single animal. Liana felt the weight of hundreds of minds snap into place. A story that fit was more delicious than a story that was true. Damir turned his head slowly toward her, and his eyes were almost gentle. Almost. A father looking at a daughter who had stepped off the script. Liana did not flinch. She forced herself to breathe. Mavra's veil kept her from shaking, but it did not stop the cold in her spine. Regent Curson's mouth curved faintly, so it seems grief has found its culprit. Damir's voice stayed calm, but the air around his words hardened. The princess has stood at my side all week, under guard, under ward, in plain sight. If this low rank says she met him, then he lies or someone used her name. The elder judges conferred with glances. One of them, a woman with hair white as bone, spoke. We will test the oath. The priest lifted the bowl and pushed it toward the prisoner. Drink, he commanded. Let the seal bind deeper. Let the lie burn if it is a lie. The prisoner stared at the blood, trembling. In the court of blood, drinking from the oath bowl tightened the seal until it squeezed the mind. If he lied, it would hurt. If he told truth, it would hurt less. Either way, it hurt. Liana knew what Damir wanted. He wanted the court to see him as fair. He wanted a public process that ended in a name he could use. And the regent wanted a public process that ended in her name. Liana's gaze flicked to the shadowed entrances. She felt the bond thread tug faintly, as if a distant tide had turned. Aristarh was near. She could not see him, but the sensation was unmistakable. It made her skin tighten with anger and relief at the same time. The prisoner lifted the bowl with shaking hands and drank. He screamed, not a theatrical scream, not a controlled one, a scream that tore out of him like a ripped tendon. His spine arched, the iron bands rattled, and his eyes rolled back. The oath seal on his brow flared, then dimmed. The priest leaned close. "Speak," he said. "Speak again. Who sent you?" The prisoner sobbed, blood frothing at the corner of his mouth. "The princess," he rasped again, and this time the scream that followed was shorter, as if the seal approved. Liana's stomach dropped. If the seal approved, then either he believed the lie so fully it became truth to his mind, or the seal itself had been tampered with. Tampered, Liana thought, looking at the priest's hands. The priest belonged to Damir. Yet the outcome served the regent. It served Damir too, in a different way, because it turned his daughter into a tool for tightening control. Damir rose slowly. "My daughter will answer," he said. The hall quieted, hungry. Liana stepped forward onto the pale inlay. She felt the drain beneath her feet, the promise that blood would not stain. She wondered if the designers of this place had thought that made it clean. She faced the judges, then the crowd, then the regent. Her voice remained steady. "I did not meet this man. I did not hire hunters. I did not send anyone to the ravine. I did not kill Aristarh." Regent Curson's eyes narrowed slightly. "You deny the oath." "I deny the process," Liana replied. "Your proof is a man in pain, and pain can be engineered. Your proof is hunter tools that could be planted. Your proof is an oath seal that can be bent by anyone who knows how." A ripple of anger rose, but also discomfort. Even in a room built for judgment, some vampires remembered old fear of manipulation. The disappearances had taught them that their certainty could be stolen. Damir's voice cut through. "My daughter is not permitted to question the court of blood." Liana turned toward him. She kept her face composed, but her words sharpened. "Then permit me to save your court from being used." Damir's eyes flashed, and Liana realized she had pushed too far. But she also realized something else. Damir had expected her to obey. He had not expected her to threaten the smooth narrative. Regent Curson stepped forward again. "The princess speaks like a conspirator," he said softly. "She speaks like someone hiding a larger crime." The larger crime, Liana thought, was the regent's. She felt the bond thread tug harder. A warning, a pull that had the shape of urgency. Then, like a breath against her ear, a sensation that was not thought but presence. Aristarh was close enough to act. Liana clenched her hands and kept her gaze forward. She would not search for him. She would not give the court a visible crack to pry open. The elder judge with white hair spoke again. "The court will require a counter-proof, a witness, an alternative culprit. If the princess denies the oath, she must offer a path that leads elsewhere." Liana understood the trap. Offer no alternative, and she looked guilty. Offer an alternative, and she made an enemy of whoever she named. Before she could speak, a voice came from the shadowed entrance behind the light seats. "There is an alternative." The room turned. A figure stepped into the torchlight with a pale cloak pulled low, face partially masked by a simple band of cloth like a mourner. The voice was light, controlled, and Liana felt the bond thread tighten in her chest as if it had been grabbed. Aristarh, hidden in plain sight. He walked to the edge of the central circle and stopped, careful not to step onto the pale inlay. Not yet. Regent Curson's face tightened, but he recovered quickly. You speak for a dead lord, he said. Who are you? Someone who carried his authority, Aristarh replied. Someone who knows what the regent hides. A stir ran through the light delegation. Confusion, anger, fear. Vampires who had been told to mourn reacted badly to an intruder who spoke like a ruler. Damir's eyes narrowed. This is theater, he said. This is a light trick. Aristarh's gaze flicked to Liana for a fraction of a second. The bond thread pulsed. Then he looked away as if cutting the connection by force. I offer a culprit, Aristarh said. Not the princess, not a dark low rank, one of my own. Regent Curson's nostrils flared. You dare. Aristarh raised a hand and two pale cloaked guards entered, dragging a bound light vampire between them. The captive's posture was straight despite the bindings. He looked high rank, older, strong. His expression was calm in the way of someone who had already accepted the arc of events. This one is named Selvir, Aristarh said. He was found with hunter salts. He was seen near the salt drains. He can endure your court's questions. He will survive your pain. Use him. Let the princess go. A wave of murmurs surged, not just shock but fascination. A high rank offered up like meat. A gift that smelled like strategy. Liana's skin went cold. This was the move Aristarh had hinted at in the fort, choosing who the court would demand, choosing a scapegoat that could survive. Liana stared at Selvir, trying to read him. Selvir's eyes met hers, and there was no plea in them. Only a grim acknowledgement, as if he had volunteered, or been ordered, or both. Damir's smile returned, slow and dangerous. How generous, he said. The light offers us one of their own to punish. That would soothe my people. Regent Curson stepped forward, voice sharp. This is not lawful. This is not sanctioned. The hive did not authorize this. Aristarh's voice remained calm. The hive authorized survival. My authority is not erased by rumor. Liana's mind raced. If she accepted this, she would live. The crowd would have its blood. Damir would get his public cleansing. The regent would lose a piece, perhaps, but could also twist it into a martyr story. And a light high rank would be tortured because rulers had decided he could endure it. Liana felt something inside her break cleanly, like a bone snapping. Not because she had suddenly become pure, because she recognized the shape of her father in Aristarh's offer. People as coins. Liana stepped forward and onto the pale inlay, into the center where blood drained away. Every eye tracked her. No, she said. Damir's brows lifted. No. Regent Curson's mouth tightened with interest. Aristarh's shoulders stiffened. I will not let this court purchase my innocence with another life, Liana continued. I will not wear a man's pain as proof of my virtue. If the court of blood needs blood to feel clean, then it will never be clean. Damir's voice turned sharp. Liana. She turned her head toward him. Her voice stayed steady, but it carried. You declared a betrothal to Aristarh to calm the city, she said. The city is not calm. You declared a court to find truth. The court is being fed lies. You both want a scapegoat because it is easier than admitting you are afraid of a third force you do not control. A roar of protest rose. Some dark courtiers surged to their feet. Light guards shifted. The judges banged staff on stone. Liana kept speaking before the noise could swallow her. I refuse the betrothal, she said, publicly. Here, now. The amphitheater seemed to tilt as if the room itself leaned toward her words. Damir's face went still. You do not have that right, he said softly, and the softness was worse than shouting. I do, Liana replied. In dark law, a betrothal announced as political shield can be withdrawn when it endangers the bloodline. You taught me that claws yourself when I was a child. Damir's eyes burned. He had forgotten he had taught her. Or he had assumed she would never dare use the teaching against him. Regent Curson's gaze slid to Aristarh, and satisfaction flickered in it. The regent did not need to convict her if she could be isolated. Public rupture did that work for him. Aristar's gaze found Liana's again, and the bond thread yanked hard enough that Liana's breath caught. In that look, she saw something like shock, then anger, then something quieter and more dangerous. Calculation. He opened his mouth. Liana felt it before he spoke. The subtle shift in the bond thread, a loosening where pain should have tightened, a wrongness. Aristarh was about to lie. Do not, she thought, but she could not send the thought across. The bond did not carry thoughts. It carried consequence. Aristarh spoke. The princess is right, he said. This court is being used. Selvir is guilty, and I place him under dark judgment. The lie slid out smoothly. Liana stared. The bond did not flare with pain the way it had when she imagined lies. It did not punish him. Instead, it pulsed deeper, heavier, as if the lie had sunk hooks into both of them. Aristarh's eyes did not meet hers now. He kept them on the judges, on Damir, on the regent. He was playing the room. Damir's smile widened. Then we have our culprit. The light offers blood and the dark accepts. The elder judges conferred quickly. The crowd demanded an immediate verdict. The judges, who pretended they were above crowd hunger, bowed to it as they always did. Selvir was taken off the platform and dragged toward the inner chambers where pain was applied with ceremonial precision. Liana tried to move after him, but dark guards blocked her. Damir's hand closed around her upper arm. His grip was not gentle. Enough, he murmured into her ear. You have embarrassed me in front of my court. Now you will learn what embarrassment costs. Liana did not struggle. Struggling would be used as proof. She allowed herself to be escorted out with her father's hand on her like a brand. As she was led away, she felt the bond thread pull again, tight with something that tasted like guilt and need. Aristarh was still there, watching the court's verdict harden into blood. He had lied, and somehow the lie had bound them more tightly. Damir did not punish her in the way the crowd would have expected. He did not beat her. He did not lock her in a dungeon where rumors could paint him as a monster. He used something more effective. He confined her to the ancestral wing, the part of the palace where old portraits watched from dark walls and the air smelled of sealed stone. He posted guards not outside her door, but inside her rooms, silent sentries who did not speak and did not sleep, making privacy impossible. Then, on the third night after the Court of Blood, he brought priests. They entered with bowls of black salt and thick candles that burned with a low flame. Their faces were expressionless, but their eyes held a kind of zeal that made Liana's skin tighten. They were not there to punish her body, they were there to correct her blood. Damir stood behind them, hands clasped, voice mild. The city is restless, he said. The Light Regent spreads poison. Some of my own elders question your loyalty. You made yourself dangerous, Liana. You made yourself a weak point. Liana's jaw tightened. You are going to fix me. Damir's eyes gleamed. I am going to secure you. You will undergo the rite of root. You will be bound to the dark line so deeply that no light thread can claim you. Then no one can use you as leverage. Liana felt cold spread through her. The rite of root was older than courts. It was a forced ritual that re-anchored a vampire to a lineage through pain and blood memory. It did not just bind legally. It rewrote instinct. You cannot, she said. Damir's smile was small. I can. The priests drew a circle of black salt on the floor and placed the candles at cardinal points. They brought a thin blade, not silvered, a blade meant to hold magic. One priest reached for Liana's wrist. The bond thread in her chest yanked so hard she gasped. For a moment, she thought Aristarh had entered the palace, that he was close enough to feel her danger. But the sensation was different. It was not his presence. It was a surge from inside her own body. Her stomach clenched. A sudden wave of nausea hit her, sharp and unexpected. Vampires did not often feel nausea. It was too human, too bodily. She staggered half a step, and the priest's hand tightened to steady her. Damir's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" Liana pressed her palm to her abdomen, stunned by the unfamiliar sensation. Then another feeling rose beneath the nausea, a faint warmth that did not belong to torchlight. She remembered old whispers. Pregnancy in vampires was rare, and when it occurred it moved slowly, hidden until magic forced the body to declare itself. The rite of root was forcing declaration. No, Liana thought, not now. One of the priests paused, head tilting as if listening to blood. His eyes widened. "My prince," he said. "She carries." Damir went very still. Liana's throat tightened. "Do not say it." The priest swallowed. "An heir," he said. "A seed already set. The ritual awakens it." Silence fell heavy as stone. Damir's gaze locked on Liana's abdomen as if he could see through skin. His expression shifted through several possibilities too fast for a human to track. Shock, calculation, and something like hunger for leverage. "Whose?" he asked softly. Liana lifted her chin. "None of your questions are safe for you to ask." Damir's smile returned, slow. "Every question is safe when I own the room." Liana's mind raced. If Damir could claim the child as dark by ritual force, he would hold a legal weapon against the Light Hive. If the Light Regent could claim the child as light by accusation and propaganda, he would have a rallying symbol for war. And if the child was of both, it would terrify everyone who believed blood purity was the foundation of order. Damir stepped closer until he was within arm's length. His voice stayed low. "This changes everything," he said. "You will not leave this wing. You will not be seen without my approval. The city will not know until I decide what story serves us best." Liana's hands clenched. "I am not your vessel." Damir's eyes hardened. "You are my daughter," which is another word for asset. He turned to the priests. "Do not perform the rite of root. Not yet. We will craft a better binding. One that ensures the child is mine to deploy." The priests bowed. Liana's stomach twisted again, and she realized with cold clarity that the nausea was not the worst of it. The worst of it was that her body had produced something Damir could sell, and now her body was a battlefield. When Damir left, the guards stayed. The candles were extinguished, but the black salt circle remained on the floor as a reminder that her lineage could be redrawn at any time. Liana sat on the edge of her bed, breathing slowly, trying to feel the new life inside her, trying to understand what it meant. The bond thread pulsed, and with it came a faint sensation like a distant hand pressing against glass. Aristarh, she thought. If he knew, he would act. Then she remembered his lie in the court of blood, the smoothness of it, the way it did not hurt him and yet had hurt her in a different way. How could he lie without consequence? She knew the answer before she had proof. Demon work. Aristarh found Cyril beneath the city where even the salt drains avoided the stone. He went alone because demons respected solitude more than armies. He carried no weapon because demons did not fear blades. He carried a small vial of his own blood because demons understood trade. The chamber he entered was not built. It was hollowed, as if something had eaten the rock and left a smooth cavity behind. The air was warm, and it smelled faintly of copper and old smoke. A voice came from the dark, soft as silk rubbed the wrong way. Aristarh of the Light Hives, it said. You wear death like a cloak. How fashionable. Aristarh did not bow. Demons interpreted bowing as invitation. Cyril, he said, I require a change in my bond. A laugh whispered through the chamber. A true bond cannot be broken, it said. You know that. I do not ask to break it, Aristarh replied. I ask for a single function. I must be able to lie to her without pain. Silence, then the sensation of something shifting in the dark, something turning its attention fully toward him. You want to lie to the one you are bound to, Cyril said. That is a delicious request. Tell me why? Aristarh's jaw tightened. Because truth will get her killed. Another soft laugh. Truth often does, and lies often do too. What will you pay? Aristarh held up the vial of blood. Taste is not what you want. Cyril's voice grew closer, not in space but in sensation, like a presence pressing against his skull. I want your restraint, it said. I want the part of you that believes control can replace surrender. I want your certainty that you can steer consequences. Aristarh's voice stayed steady. Name the price. Cyril hummed softly. I will let you lie without pain, it said. The bond will not punish your tongue, but each lie will strengthen what you try to escape. Each time you choose falsehood, you will sink deeper into each other. Emotion, instinct, need. It will become harder to be apart, harder to choose anyone else, harder to choose duty over her life. Aristarh felt a cold ripple go through him. That sounded like punishment disguised as gift. And the cost, he said. Cyril's voice softened. The cost comes later. When you finally decide to stop lying, I will take what you love most about being a predator. Aristarh's throat tightened. The taste of blood. Cyril laughed, pleased. Yes, the taste. You will still feed. You will still survive. But the pleasure will be gone. Every drink will be function, not joy. You will remember what you lost each time you swallow. Aristarh closed his eyes for a brief moment. To lose taste was to lose one of the few comforts that made immortality bearable. It was to be turned into a machine. He thought of Liana in Damir's palace, trapped behind guards and rituals. He thought of the regent shaping a war narrative. He thought of Selvir being taken to torture because Aristarh had decided someone could endure it. He opened his eyes. Agreed, he said. The dark moved. Something touched his mouth without touching, like a cold thread drawn across his lips. Then Cyril whispered, and remember, your lies will bind you tighter. The bond will become your leash. Aristarh swallowed. It already was. He left the chamber with no visible mark, but inside he felt the difference immediately. The bond thread, once a pressure that tightened at the edge of deception, now lay quiet, almost permissive. It was worse than pain. Pain at least warned you where the line was. Now there was no line, only consequence that would arrive later. He went back into shadow and began to build a counter-story that could save Liana, knowing each lie he told her would pull them closer until neither could breathe without the other. In the days that followed, Regent Curson moved like a knife through the Light Hive. He declared mourning as law. He declared Aristarh's policies suspect. He declared dissent a disease. Light vampires who had supported negotiation were accused of softness. Those who questioned the disappearance patterns were accused of distraction. Low ranks were forced into tighter formations and punished for wandering, which made them easier to control and easier to harvest when hunters struck. The hunters did not stop. They moved through drains and abandoned tunnels. They took more low ranks from both sides, but always in a pattern that allowed propaganda to blame the other court. Damir used the unrest to tighten his own grip. He raised patrols. He restricted movement. He announced that any vampire found with alchemical solvents would be executed, which conveniently removed anyone who might investigate solvents. Liana remained confined. She measured time by the change in guard shifts, by the subtle swelling in her abdomen that only she could sense, by the way her hunger shifted in strange directions. She found herself craving not just blood but salt, brine, mineral taste, as if the child inside her was building itself from the marsh. One night, Mavra appeared in her room as if the walls had sighed and let her in. The witch stood near the window, eyes reflecting candlelight. No guard announced her. No ward flared. Liana sat up sharply. "How did you get in?" Mavra shrugged. "Doors are agreements. I do not respect agreements that were not made with me." Liana's voice went low. "Damir is binding the palace if he detects you." Mavra's smile was thin. "He will not. He is focused on more satisfying prey." Liana swallowed. "You know about the child. I smell it," Mavra said. "It changes you. It changes how the bond sits on your skin." Liana's hands clenched on the blanket. "Can you hide it?" Mavra tilted her head. "Hide a child from its grandfather?" "No, not with him living in the same stone, but I can hide a detail." "What detail?" Liana asked. Mavra stepped closer. "I can blur the child's nature. When Damir's priests try to measure bloodline, the answer will come back uncertain. Mixed. Ambiguous." Liana's throat tightened. "That will make them more afraid." "Yes," Mavra said softly. "Fear is leverage. You will need leverage." Liana stared at her. "What do you want?" Mavra's eyes glittered. "A second payment. I have nothing left to give," Liana said. Mavra's smile sharpened. "You have a future memory. The first time you feel the child move. The first true confirmation that it is real. Give me that moment and you will be harder to read." Liana's stomach twisted, not nausea this time, but grief. The first movement would be hers. Something not owned by courts. Mavra watched her, patient, predatory. Liana thought of Damir's priests. She thought of the forced ritual that had been planned. She thought of the regent's hunger for narrative. She thought of Aristarh's presence like a distant tide. "Do it," Liana whispered. Mavra's fingers traced a symbol in the air. The candle flame bent. For a breath, Liana felt a tug in her mind like a page being loosened from a spine. Then it was done. Mavra stepped back. "When the child moves, you will know it happened. But you will not be able to relive the sensation. You will not betray yourself in softness." Liana's throat tightened. "You are cruel." Mavra's smile did not change. "I am practical." Liana leaned forward. "Tell me something. If the memory I paid you, the first bond spark, if it is sealed, can it return?" Mavra's eyes sharpened, and for the first time she looked almost wary. "Seals can break," she said, "but not always the way you want. Sometimes a memory comes back wrong. Sometimes it returns as someone else's recollection. Sometimes it returns as a dream that is not yours." Liana's skin tightened. "Why?" "Because memory is not only personal," Mavra said. "It is also currency. If it has been spent, it can be spent again by another hand." Before Liana could demand more, Mavra moved toward the window. "Be careful of your light," she said, not looking back. "He has learned to bend the bond." Then she was gone, leaving behind only the faint smell of ash. Liana sat very still. "He has learned to bend the bond." A demon, she thought again, and now the thought carried a new dread. If Aristarh could lie, then she could no longer use the bond as her last tool for truth. She would have to judge him the old way, by pattern and choice, and she would have to survive long enough to do it. Damir chose the moment of maximum audience to attempt his new binding. He announced a public rite, not in the court of blood but in the upper hall of salt, framed as a reassurance to the city. He called it the rite of continuance, a ceremony to anchor the dark line against foreign influence, to prevent further disappearances by strengthening ancestral wards. It was a lie, and everyone knew it, and they came anyway because the Dark Court loved lies that wore ceremonial clothes. Liana was dressed in black silk and a collar of carved obsidian. The collar sat too close to her throat. It felt like a promise of choking. She was led into the hall under heavy guard, and she saw faces turned toward her with fascination and contempt. To many, she was already guilty. To others, she was a symbol. To Damir, she was an asset that had complicated itself by producing a child. The priests formed a circle. Bowls of blood were placed at measured distances. Old words were spoken, words that made the salt in the floor inlay gleam faintly. Damir stood at the head of the hall, voice warm. "Tonight we anchor what is ours," he proclaimed. "Tonight we reject the poison of light and the cowardice of hunters." Liana's gaze flicked to the crowd. She saw a cluster of light observers at the edge, sent by Regent Curson to witness. The regent himself was not present. He did not risk his body. He risked other bodies. The lead priest lifted a blade. "Princess," he said, "offer your wrist." Liana held her arm out, steady. She would not give Damir the satisfaction of seeing fear. The blade touched her skin, and then the torches guttered, not flickered. Guttered as if a wind had passed through the hall that no one could feel. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Guards tightened formation. Liana felt the bond thread slam taut in her chest, so hard she almost gasped. Presence surged into the hall like a wave. A figure stepped out from behind a pillar near the back, moving with the absolute authority of someone who no longer cared about secrecy. Aristarh, no cloak, no mask, his pale hair loose, his eyes cold and bright. The crowd froze for a heartbeat, then erupted into noise. Alive, light trick, demon, witch, assassination. Damir's face went still, then sharpened with fury. "You," he said, voice cutting through the hall, "you dare return to my city after your own death." Aristarh's voice carried without effort. "I did not die," he said. "I staged my death because my regent is a traitor and because your court is a trap. Stop the ritual." Damir's laugh was low. "You give me orders in my hall." Aristarh's gaze slid to Liana's wrist, to the blade poised there. His jaw tightened. "I do not order you," he said. "I warn you. If you bind her by force, you will start a war you cannot control. Not with light. With what is under your city." Damir's eyes narrowed. "Under my city." Aristarh lifted a hand and tossed something onto the floor. A small leather packet burst, scattering a pale powder across the salt inlay. The powder shimmered, then sank into the stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the inlay lines flared, not with light but with absence, as if sections of the floor swallowed torch glow. The air tasted suddenly of bitter metal and herbs. "Hunters," someone whispered. Aristarh's voice remained calm. "The drains beneath this hall have been used as a corridor. They have been used to move your missing low ranks and mine. The regent funds the hunters. He calls it cleansing. He calls it balance. He calls it justice." Damir's gaze hardened. "Proof." Aristarh gestured and two figures dragged a bound captive into the hall. This captive was human, masked, trembling, not dead like the one in the fort. Alive. The human's mask was torn away, revealing a face mottled with old burns. A hunter. Aristarh's eyes stayed on Damir. This one was taken with letters on his body. Codes, payment marks. They trace to your city's black market and to the Light Regent seal. I have the ledger copies hidden where your court cannot reach. Damir's expression shifted. He was weighing not truth but advantage. Liana stood very still, wrist still extended, blade still near skin. Her breath was shallow. The bond thread pulsed so hard she felt it in her teeth. She looked at Aristarh and searched his face for the shape of deception. He met her gaze for a fraction of a second, and the bond did not punish him. It did not flare. It did not warn. Cyril, she thought, he can lie now. Yet Aristarh's eyes held something raw that was not easy to counterfeit. Fear, not for himself, for her. Damir raised a hand. Seize him, he snapped. Dark guards surged forward. Aristarh moved faster than the guards expected, not by running but by commanding space. He spoke a single word in an old light tongue, and the air in front of him thickened, a barrier that made the first wave of guards slam to a halt as if they had hit unseen stone. Liana's priest jerked, startled, and the blade nicked her wrist. A thin line of blood appeared. The ritual reacted instantly. The bowls of blood in the hall shuddered as if something in the old wards recognized her blood and tried to pull on it. The black salt circle under her feet grew warm. Liana's stomach clenched, and a surge of pain ran through her abdomen, sharp enough that her vision blurred. The child her mind supplied and panic rose. Aristarh saw the blur of her posture, the change in her scent, and his control cracked. Liana, he said, voice no longer ceremonial. Damir's eyes snapped to her abdomen, then back to Aristarh. His smile returned, savage. Ah, he said softly, so that is the truth. My daughter carries the light seed. The crowd roared. Liana's vision steadied, and anger burned through the pain. She forced her voice out. Do not speak of my child as if it is your banner, she hissed. Damir ignored her. He lifted his hand toward the priests. Bind her. Now. The priests began chanting again, faster, harsher. The bowls of blood trembled. Aristarh's gaze hardened into decision. He stepped forward, and the barrier shattered outward, flinging guards back like broken dolls. He crossed the distance to Liana with lethal speed. Damir shouted, "Kill him." A dark guard swung a blade. Aristarh caught it with his bare hand and snapped the metal as if it were brittle reed. He did not even look at the guard when he backhanded him into unconsciousness. Aristarh reached Liana. He did not touch her yet. He stared at the collar on her throat, then at the priest's blade. "Stop," he said, voice like iron. The priest hesitated. Damir's authority had always been absolute. But Aristarh's presence now felt like something older, a storm front that made instinct question obedience. The priest's hand trembled. Aristarh finally touched Liana, fingers closing around her wrist just above the cut. The contact sent a shock through the bond that almost made Liana gasp. Heat rushed up her arm. Aristarh looked at the collar, then at her, and spoke quietly. "Can you remove it?" Liana swallowed. "No, the clasp is keyed to my father's blood." Aristarh's jaw tightened. Damir strode forward, face furious now, no longer smiling. "You will not steal my daughter from my hall." Aristarh's voice stayed calm, and Liana realized with a chill that he was choosing his words carefully. Perhaps lying, perhaps telling truth. The bond would not tell her. "I am not stealing her," Aristarh said. I am returning what you are about to destroy. Damir laughed. You speak as if you care for her. Aristarh looked at Liana, and for a heartbeat the room seemed to quiet around that look. I care enough to ruin myself, he said. Then he did something Liana did not expect. He turned his head slightly, exposing his throat, and he spoke a single, brutal command to the hall. Look. The word hit like a slap of compulsion. Vampires who met his gaze felt it. They did not obey out of loyalty. They obeyed out of the old instinct that recognized a true ruler and a true threat. Aristarh released Liana's wrist and took the priest's blade. He cut his own palm. Bright blood welled. Then he pressed his bleeding palm against Liana's collar. The collar was keyed to Damir's blood, but it was still ward craft, still contract magic. Blood could rewrite contracts if it carried enough authority and enough cost. The collar hissed as if it were alive. The obsidian warmed, then cracked. The clasp snapped open and fell to the floor. The hall exploded into chaos. Damir lunged, but two light loyalists who had slipped into the hall with Aristarh intercepted him, buying a heartbeat. Aristarh grabbed Liana's hand, and for the first time he pulled her with no pretense of permission. Run, he said. They moved through a side corridor as guards shouted behind them. Liana's feet barely touched stone. Pain still pulsed in her abdomen, but adrenaline drowned it. They plunged downstairs, through a service passage, into the salt drains beneath the palace where the air tasted of brine and mold. Aristarh led with certainty, turning corners as if he had walked these tunnels all his life. You have maps, Liana gasped. He answered without looking back. I have been here longer than your father thinks. A lie or a truth, she could not tell. Behind them, voices echoed. Dark guards, priests. The palace was awake and hunting. Aristarh stopped at an iron grate and shoved it aside with a grunt. They emerged into the night near the marsh edge where fog hugged the ground like cloth. A small boat waited in a reed pocket. Two light loyalists stood by it, tense. Aristarh pushed Liana into the boat, then climbed in after her. The loyalists shoved them into deeper water and disappeared into fog. As the boat slid through black water, Liana turned toward Aristarh, breathing hard. You exposed me, she said. You revealed the child. Aristarh's jaw clenched. Damir would have revealed it anyway. The ritual was forcing it out. You offered Selvir, Liana said, voice shaking now with rage and exhaustion. You told the court he was guilty. Aristarh's gaze met hers. I needed the court to focus on someone else for long enough to keep you alive. You needed a scapegoat, Liana snapped. Aristarh's expression tightened. Selvir volunteered. Liana stared at him, searching for the bond's warning. Nothing. Her stomach turned with a different nausea, one made of mistrust. You can lie, she said. Aristarh did not deny it. Yes. How? A demon, Aristarh said, voice low. Cyril. Liana's throat tightened. You made a demon bargain to lie to me. I made it so I could maneuver without the bond locking my tongue, Aristarh replied. If I had been forced into truth with you, you would have been killed by that truth. Liana's hands clenched on the boat's edge, and every lie binds us more. Aristarh's eyes darkened. Yes, you did this to both of us. I did, he said, and I am sorry. Sorry is cheap, Liana said. Aristarh flinched as if struck. The bond pulsed. Then show me cost, Liana continued. Show me that you are not my father with different colors. Aristarh looked away toward the fog. You will see it, he said quietly. You will hate it. They reached the neutral fort before dawn. The old walls rose out of fog like a memory made stone. Liana spoke the invitation, voice hoarse, and the wards recognized them, letting them in. Inside, she sank onto a bench, pressing a hand to her abdomen. The pain had eased, but it left a dull ache like a bruise. Aristarh crouched in front of her. His fingers hovered near her knee but did not touch. "Are you harmed?" he asked. Liana's laugh was bitter. "Harmed? I am a walking claim." Aristar's jaw tightened. "We will keep you hidden." Liana's eyes narrowed. "Hidden from Damir. Hidden from the regent. Hidden from both courts. And then what? You raise a child in a ruin." Aristar's voice stayed steady. "I will end the regent. I will burn the hunter network. Then we negotiate with your father from a position where he cannot pretend he does not need us." "Us," Liana repeated. "You speak as if I am already allied." Aristarh met her gaze. "You are, whether you like it or not. The courts have already bound us in rumor. The demon has bound us in consequence. The child binds us in law." Liana swallowed. In the fort's dim light, she could see Aristar's palm where he had cut it to break her collar. The wound was already closing, but a faint line remained. "You chose me over secrecy," she said slowly. Aristar's gaze held hers. "Yes," Liana's voice sharpened. "And you chose Selvir over truth." Aristarh did not look away. "Yes," Liana breathed out, and the breath felt like it carried a small part of her old certainty away. "Then we are both compromised," she said. Aristar's mouth tightened. Yes, that was the closest thing to honesty she had heard all week. The next days blurred into strategy. Aristar's loyalists slipped in and out of the fort with messages. The Light Hive was splitting. Some elders believed the regent. Some were uneasy at the speed of purges. Low ranks were disappearing faster, and now some mid-ranks too, which meant the hunters had expanded their reach or the regent had escalated his cleansing. Damir moved his own pieces. He declared Liana kidnapped by Light. He offered a bounty to any who returned her. He used her absence to justify harsher patrols and to arrest dark vampires who had questioned the court of blood. He told the city that discipline was protection. Liana listened to reports and felt the trap tighten. If she stayed hidden, Damir controlled her story. If she appeared openly beside Aristarh, the city would riot. If she returned alone, Damir would bind her again. Aristarh spread a map on the fort table and traced the salt drain network with his finger. "The hunter corridor runs here," he said, "and here, under the Hall of Salt, under the canal gate, under the light border tunnel. It is one system." Liana's eyes narrowed. "And the regent funds it." "We need proof that the courts cannot deny," Aristarh replied. "A ledger. A living witness with authority." Liana's mind turned toward one of the few levers she still had. "My father believes in law even when he uses it as theater," she said. "If I can force him into a temporary war protocol, he will honor it publicly because breaking it would make him look weak." Aristar's gaze sharpened. "He will not sign it for compassion." "No," Liana said. "He will sign it for advantage." "If we offer him the regent's head, he will sign." Aristar's mouth tightened. "And if we offer him hunter secrets, alchemical methods, solvent recipes, ways to protect dark wards." Liana looked at him. "You think like my father again." Aristar's eyes flickered. "I think like a ruler. I hate that I must." Liana stared at the map. "Then we do it," she said. "But on my terms." Aristar's brows lifted. Liana's voice steadied. "We capture proof of the regent's funding. We expose his network. Then I approach my father, not to beg, to offer him a public victory against a third force which he can frame as dark dominance." Aristarh nodded slowly. "And in exchange, he leaves you unbound." Liana's mouth tightened. "He cannot leave me unbound. He will demand a leash." "Then we give him a leash he cannot pull," Aristarh said. Liana's gaze hardened. The fort? Yes, Aristarh replied. Invitation law. He can come only if you invite. It becomes your negotiating ground. Liana felt a faint, grim satisfaction. A space that belonged to her alone, in a world that tried to own her body. They planned the strike on the Hunter corridor beneath the Hall of Salt. Aristarh had loyalists inside the Light Hive who remembered old survey maps. Liana had a dark smuggler captain who owed her mother a debt and still feared the salt marsh wards. Together, they mapped a route that would bypass the main palace guards and reach a sealed junction where hunters stored tools. On the night of the operation, Liana dressed in dark armor, plain and functional. She did not wear jewelry. She did not wear a collar. She wore a blade at her hip and a second blade strapped to her thigh because pregnancy did not erase the need to kill. Aristarh stood by the fort gate, eyes on her abdomen for a heartbeat, then back to her face. If the pain returns, he said quietly, you stop. Liana's voice was flat. I do not get to stop. Aristarh's jaw tightened. I will carry you if I must. Liana almost laughed. I would rather die. Aristarh's gaze did not waver. That is exactly what I will not permit. They moved before dawn under fog through reed beds into a drainage mouth that smelled of old salt and sewage. Aristarh led the light team through the narrower tunnels where their smaller formation and silent discipline gave advantage. Liana led the dark team above, through surface alleys, preparing the frontal pressure that would pin hunters in place. It was the split they had chosen. Dark as hammer. Light as knife. Under the Hall of Salt, the tunnels widened into a chamber lined with shelves. Glass vials glimmered. Leather masks hung like flayed faces. Packets of pale powder were stacked in neat rows. It looked less like a lair and more like a workshop. A human voice hissed and crossbow bolts snapped through the dark. Aristarh's loyalists dropped low, moving like liquid. A bolt grazed Aristarh's shoulder. He did not react except to shift and close distance. A human alchemist tried to throw a vial. Aristarh caught it midair and crushed it in his fist. Powder burst, but his warded cloak muffled it. In the same instant, Liana's dark strike hit above. Her team smashed through a sealed hatch and dropped into the storage chamber like black rain. The hunters panicked. They had expected to fight one court, not both. Their clean corridor became a trap. Liana moved fast, blade flashing. She did not feed. She did not waste time. She cut tendons, disarmed, forced surrender. She remembered the low-rank prisoner in the court of blood and refused to let pain become her method. A hunter tried to rush her with a short spear. Liana sidestepped and drove her blade into his shoulder, pinning him to the stone. He screamed. "Where is the ledger?" she demanded. He spat blood. "You are all the same." "Where?" Liana repeated, voice colder. The hunter laughed, then jerked his chin toward a sealed metal box bolted to the wall. Aristarh reached it first and ripped it open. Inside were wax-sealed letters and a bound book wrapped in oilcloth. Aristarh's fingers tightened on the book. He flipped it open, eyes scanning fast. Names, he said. Payments. Seal marks. Liana leaned in and saw the regent's cipher, repeated like a heartbeat. She saw dark market contacts too, evidence that the regent had not only funded hunters but purchased dark complicity to keep the disappearances balanced enough to sustain blame. So the regent did not just want to purge his hive, she realized. He wanted to ensure dark and light stayed locked in feuds so neither could look too closely at light internal cleansing. They bound the surviving hunters and dragged them into a deeper junction where the acoustics would carry if they screamed. Liana chose one human, older, scarred, eyes steady with fanatic calm. "You will speak," she said, "or you will be handed to my father, and he will not care about truth at all." The human smiled. "You think your father is worse than us." Liana's expression did not change. "I know my father. That is why I am offering you the better choice. Speak now, and you might live long enough to regret it." The human's smile faltered. A heartbeat later, he nodded once. He spoke quickly, listing rendezvous points and payment routes, confirming that Regent Curson had arranged the corridor access through Light Survey archives and paid through a chain of human fronts. He confirmed the Regent's doctrine: balance through removal, fear through disappearance, control through mourning law. Aristarh recorded it in memory and in marks on stone because paper could be burned. When they finished, they withdrew before the palace response could fully mobilize. Above them, dark patrol horns began to sound. Damir's city had noticed an intrusion. They returned to the fort by fog and reed. There, with the ledger and a living witness hidden in the fort's lower cellar, Liana prepared to approach her father. Aristarh watched her strap on her cloak, his gaze heavy. "He will try to take you," he said. Liana's voice stayed steady. "He will try. But this time I walk in with teeth." Aristarh hesitated. "Let me come." Liana shook her head. "If you appear, he will try to kill you or use you. If you stay hidden, you remain my threat. And I need my father to believe I have leverage, not protection." Aristarh's jaw tightened. "You are alone, then?" Liana looked at him. "I have always been alone. Now I have a fort and a ledger." Aristarh's eyes darkened. "And a bond." Liana's throat tightened. "Yes, and I do not know when it is truth and when it is demon." Aristarh flinched. Liana spoke quietly, forcing the words out. "If you lie to me again, I may not survive it." Aristarh's voice was rough. "I know." She left him in the fort and went into Damir's city under a flag of parley that her father could not refuse without looking weak. Damir received her in the Hall of Salt with guards lining the walls. His expression was controlled, but his eyes held a tight brightness that betrayed anger. "My runaway daughter returns," he said, "with no collar, with no escort. How brave." Liana held out the bound ledger wrapped in oilcloth. "Evidence," she said, "of the regent funding the hunters." Damir did not take it immediately. He measured her. "And what do you want in exchange for this gift?" "A temporary war protocol," Liana said. "Dark forces and light loyalists strike the hunter network and the Light Regent. Publicly, you frame it as dark justice against a third force. You claim victory. In exchange, you stop trying to bind me by force. You allow me to reside at my fort under my authority." Damir's smile sharpened. "You want exile with sovereignty." "I want survival with autonomy," Liana replied. Damir's eyes flicked to her abdomen and his gaze lingered there like a hand. "And the child?" Liana's voice went colder. "The child is not a bargaining token." Damir's smile widened. "Everything is a bargaining token. But you will be pleased, perhaps, to know that your child is precisely why I will consider this." Liana's stomach tightened. She did not ask why. She already knew. A mixed heir was a weapon, a future claim, a story. Damir reached out and took the ledger at last. He flipped it open, eyes scanning. His expression shifted subtly, not with shock but with satisfaction. "The regent is ambitious," he murmured. "Ambition makes men sloppy." He looked up at Liana. "You bring me a chance to strike the Light Hive at its throat while blaming humans. That is elegant. It is necessary," Liana said. "If the hunters continue, your low ranks will vanish until your city tears itself apart." Damir's smile thinned. "Do not speak to me as if you are the one who understands stability." Liana held his gaze. I am the one who understands being used. For a moment, something like respect flickered in Damir's eyes, quickly smothered. Very well, he said. A temporary war protocol, under my banner. You will return to your fort. You will invite me when I require presence. You will not shelter light in my territory without my knowledge. Liana's jaw tightened. The fort is mine. Damir's eyes glittered. So is your blood. Liana swallowed the retort because she needed the signature more than she needed the last word. Damir signed the protocol with a cut of his thumb, pressing blood to parchment. The paper drank it and sealed. Liana took the sealed protocol and left before Damir could change his mind or add hidden clauses. As she walked out, she felt the bond thread pulse, and for a heartbeat she sensed Aristarh's presence like a distant flame. He was waiting. The final operation unfolded over 2 nights. On the first night, Damir's dark forces struck openly at known hunter fronts in the city: warehouses, tannery basements, smuggler docks. It was loud and brutal, designed to be seen. Damir wanted the city to taste victory. He wanted a public enemy he could kill. Liana led the first wave, not because she trusted Damir's generals, but because she needed to control where blood spilled. She chose capture where possible. She chose evidence over spectacle when she could, even though spectacle was Damir's language. On the second night, while dark forces drew attention above ground, Aristarh led light loyalists through the tunnels that connected to the Light Hives' lower arteries. He moved like a surgeon, cutting out the regent's support nodes. They found the regent's hidden chamber not in a throne room, but in a map room lined with old survey scrolls. Curson stood there with 2 elite guards, calm as if he had been expecting this moment. Aristarh entered with his loyalists. He did not posture. He did not speak a grand accusation. Regent, he said. Curson's mouth curved. Ghost, he replied, you should have stayed dead. Aristarh's eyes were cold. You funded hunters. Curson shrugged. I funded balance. You would have let the hives soften. You would have let dark poison become normal. You purged your own, Aristarh said. Curson's gaze did not waver. Weakness must be removed. Fear is a tool. You taught us that by existing. Aristarh stepped forward. Your doctrine ends. Curson's eyes flicked over Aristarh's formation. You come with loyalists, you come with tunnels, you come with evidence, but you do not come with the hive's permission. Aristarh's jaw tightened. I come with necessity. Curson smiled. Necessity is how tyrants speak. Then the regent did something Aristarh had feared. He spoke a single phrase, an old hive call meant to trigger collective instinct. A command that would make low rank surge, would make loyalists hesitate, would turn a room into chaos. Aristarh felt the call ripple through the tunnels like sound through bone. For a heartbeat, the loyalists' bodies stiffened. Instinct tugged at them. Then, in the far distance, something pushed back. Not a voice, not a counter call. A blankness, as if someone had placed a hand over the hive's mouth. The hive call faltered. Curson's eyes widened just slightly. Aristarh's loyalists recovered and surged. The fight was fast and brutal. Light against light in tight quarters, blade and strength and old ward tricks. Aristarh moved with lethal precision, taking Curson's guards down without feeding, without savor, focused only on ending the node. Curson drew a blade etched with hive script and slashed at Aristarh's throat. Aristarh caught the wrist, twisted, and snapped it. Curson hissed, not in pain but in rage. You would kill your regent, Curson spat. I will kill a traitor, Aristarh replied. Curson's eyes glittered. And what will it cost you? Aristarh hesitated for a fraction, and in that fraction Curson tried to reach for a vial at his belt, likely poison meant to erase evidence. Aristarh slammed Curson into the map table and drove his blade through the regent's shoulder, pinning him. The vial shattered harmlessly beneath them. "Bind him," Aristarh ordered. The loyalists bound Curson with iron and ward rope. Aristarh leaned close. "You will stand before both courts," he said. "You will speak your doctrine aloud. You will give them no story but truth." Curson smiled through blood. "Truth is a story too." Aristarh straightened. "Then you will learn what happens when stories collide with proof." Above ground, Damir's forces dragged captured hunters into public view, displaying them as trophies. The city roared and Damir drank in their fear and gratitude. When Liana returned to the fort, exhausted and blood-spattered, she found Aristarh already there, sitting on the bench where she had sat days earlier. "Curson is bound," Aristarh said. Liana's shoulders loosened slightly. "And the hunters?" "Broken," Aristarh replied. "Not all. Networks do not vanish in one strike, but the corridor is burned. The ledger is secured." Liana sank onto the bench, pressing a hand to her abdomen. The ache was stronger now, perhaps from stress, perhaps from the child reacting to violence. Aristarh watched her, jaw tight. "Are you safe?" Liana's voice was tired. "Safer than before, not safe." Aristarh nodded once. "The truth will spread now." Liana's gaze hardened. "And our bond?" Aristarh's eyes met hers. "It cannot stay hidden after tonight." "Because of Curson?" Liana asked. "Because of everything," Aristarh replied. "Damir will know. The hive will know. And once they know, they will either try to sever us or use us." Liana exhaled slowly. "Then we give them no room to pretend they control it." Aristarh's mouth tightened. "There is one more thing." Liana's eyes narrowed. "Speak." Aristarh's voice went low. "Cyril will take the price." Liana stared. Now Aristarh nodded. Liana's throat tightened. "What is the price?" Aristarh swallowed. "The taste of blood." Liana's hands clenched. "You made that bargain." "Yes," Aristarh said quietly, "so I could lie to you when truth would kill you." Liana's voice shook with a restrained fury. "And you did lie." Aristarh did not deny. "Yes." Liana stared at him, and the bond thread pulsed heavy between them, a thing that felt less like romance and more like a chain pulled too tight. Then Aristarh's posture changed. His shoulders tensed. He lifted a hand to his mouth as if something had touched it. His eyes widened slightly and his face went pale even for a vampire. "It is happening," he whispered. Liana leaned forward. "What?" Aristarh's jaw worked as if he were swallowing something sour. "I can feel blood," he said, voice strained. "I can smell it, but the taste is gone. It is like drinking water from a memory." Liana's chest tightened. She did not know what to say. She had demanded cost. Now she watched it arrive. Aristarh let out a slow breath. "This is what I bought with lies," he said, "and the bond still holds." Liana's voice went quieter, almost bitter. "The demon did not free you. It only changed the cage." Aristarh looked at her, and for the first time he looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with politics. "Yes." Liana sat back, hands trembling slightly despite Mavra's veil. She stared at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I do not forgive you," she said. Aristarh's voice was rough. "I did not ask for forgiveness." Liana looked up. "But you asked me to trust you." Aristarh's gaze held hers. "Yes." Liana's throat tightened. "Trust is not a switch." "I know," Aristarh said. Outside the fort, the marsh wind rose, rattling the shutters. Inside, the old wards held steady. On the third day after the operation, Damir convened a public assembly in the central square. He brought captured hunters. He brought the ledger. He brought Regent Curson in chains. He also brought Liana, because victory meant nothing if the city did not see its symbols. Liana stood on the balcony again, but this time she stood with her chin lifted, collarless, and the crowd's reaction was not pure anger. It was confusion. She was supposed to be a villain. Now she was beside Damir during a triumph. Damir spoke first, framing the story exactly as Liana had predicted. A third force tried to weaken us, he declared. Hunters, alchemists, cowards who steal rather than fight. We have crushed their corridor. We have seized their proof. And we have taken the light traitor who fed them. The crowd roared. Regent Curson was dragged forward, chained, blood dried on his face. He lifted his head and smiled at the crowd as if they were beneath him. Damir turned toward him. "Speak," he commanded. "Confess." Curson laughed softly. "Confess. You want me to give you a cleaner story than you deserve." Damir's eyes glittered. "You will speak." Curson's gaze swept the square and landed on Liana. His smile sharpened. "Your daughter carries the consequence of your greed, Dark Prince, and the light carries the consequence of mine." The crowd hissed. Damir's hand moved fast, striking Curson hard enough to snap his head sideways. Blood spattered. Then Damir leaned close. "Speak your funding," he murmured, and his voice carried just enough for the front of the crowd to hear. "Speak the hunter names, or I will drain you in public and let your hive watch you die slowly." Curson's eyes glittered. "Fear is your favorite language, too," he whispered. Damir smiled. "It is effective." Curson's posture sagged slightly, and then he began to speak, naming payment routes and contacts, confirming the ledger in his own words. The crowd's anger shifted like a flock of birds, turning from Liana toward hunters, toward light, toward any target that let them feel united. As Curson spoke, a murmur began to rise in a different tone, not rage but realization. "Aristarh," someone whispered. A light loyalist at the edge of the crowd lifted his voice. "Our Lord lives." The crowd surged, eyes scanning, searching. Aristarh stepped out from among the light delegation, no longer hiding. He walked to the base of the balcony and looked up at Damir and Liana. The square erupted into chaos. Some light vampires fell to their knees in shock. Some screamed betrayal. Some cried relief. Dark citizens hissed, seeing the dead returned like a violation of order. Damir's eyes narrowed. "You choose this moment," he said, voice carrying. Aristarh's voice was steady. "I choose the moment when proof is visible enough that lies cannot erase it." Damir's smile sharpened. "And what do you want?" Aristarh lifted his gaze to Liana. He did not speak to her directly, but the bond thread pulsed like a heartbeat. "I want the war to stop," he said to the square. "I want the hunters burned from the tunnels. I want the regent's doctrine exposed. And I want the princess free of forced bindings." The crowd roared again, divided. Damir's gaze flicked to Liana, and Liana saw the calculation. Damir could deny, and the square might turn against him. Damir could concede, and he would look as if light had demanded and dark had obeyed. So Damir did what he always did. He reframed. "My daughter is free because she is mine," Damir declared. "No light speaks law over her, but I will allow her to choose her residence at the Salt Marsh Fort because she has proven her use in this victory." Use, Liana thought, tasting the word like poison. Damir's gaze turned back to Aristarh. "As for you, light ruler, you stand on my soil, alive after you were declared dead. My city may call you demon-touched, my court may call you liar. Why should I let you leave?" Aristarh's jaw tightened. "Because if you do not, you will make me your martyr for the second time, and the hive will burn you for it." Damir laughed. "A threat, a fact," Aristarh replied. Damir's smile lingered, then he raised his hands theatrically. "Very well, let him live. Let him return to his hive and clean his own house. We have cleaned ours." The square roared approval because crowds loved the illusion of control. But Liana felt the truth beneath it. Damir had conceded only because he could control the optics. Aristarh had revealed himself only because secrecy had become less valuable than proof, and now both courts knew what they had been trying not to know. The true bond existed. Liana felt it in the way the crowd looked at her, and then at Aristarh, the way curiosity sharpened into hunger for scandal and leverage. Bond meant weakness. Bond meant a pressure point. Liana's hand drifted, unconsciously, to her abdomen. The child would be the next pressure point. In the weeks that followed, Liana moved to the fort under the cover of Damir's publicly signed protocol. Damir visited once, bringing guards to the threshold and stopping there, forced to wait until Liana invited him inside. She did not invite him. She spoke to him from within the gate, making him hear her without letting him cross. He hated it. She tasted that hatred like salt. Aristarh returned to the Light Hive and faced the elders. Some tried to challenge him. Some tried to claim the regent's doctrine had been necessary. Aristarh answered with proof and with the regent in chains, and with the fact that the hunters had taken light blood too. He did not heal the hive overnight, but he stopped the immediate coup. He also fed without tasting, and every time he did, he remembered Cyril's whisper. "Each lie binds you tighter." Liana and Aristarh met at the fort only when necessary, in daylight hours when fewer eyes watched. They spoke about patrols and remaining hunter fronts. They spoke about safe routes and ward repairs. They spoke about the child in careful terms, as if language itself might become propaganda if it leaked. Trust returned slowly, not as a flood, but as a series of small choices. When a dark patrol captain tried to enter the fort without invitation, Aristarh killed him and left the body outside the gate as a message to Damir that the protocol was not decorative. When a light elder sent an assassin disguised as a nurse, Liana caught the assassin and sent him back alive with his throat marked, a message that she would not start feeding wars inside her walls. They did not speak of love. They did not speak of destiny. They spoke of survival. And yet the bond did what bonds did. It threaded itself through every silence, every moment of proximity, every time Liana woke in the night with her hand on her abdomen and felt, faintly, that Aristarh was awake somewhere too. Months passed. The child moved, and Liana knew it, and she could not replay the sensation because Mavra had taken it. She sat alone in the fort's tower remnant, staring at the marsh fog, and felt tears threaten. Not because she was sentimental, because she had been robbed of even her own private softness. When the child was born, the fort's old wards flared as if acknowledging a new name carved into stone. They named him Damir, a name that carried both salt marsh harshness and hive rhythm, a compromise that satisfied no court fully and therefore belonged to the child. Damir did not attend the birth. He sent gifts and priests and legal papers that tried to claim guardianship. Liana burned the papers in the fort courtyard and let the ash scatter into marsh wind. Aristarh did attend, arriving at the threshold and waiting until Liana invited him in. When he entered, he moved as if afraid to take up space, then stopped beside the cradle and stared down at the child with an expression Liana could not name. He lifted the infant gently, careful, and held him as if holding something that could shatter the world. Liana watched, throat tight. "Do you feel anything?" she asked softly, meaning blood, meaning taste, meaning the predator's instinct. Aristarh looked at her. "I feel responsibility," he said. That was not an answer, but it was the answer she needed. Years later, when Damir was almost grown, the marsh fort no longer looked like a ruin. It had been repaired, strengthened, made into a third point on a map that used to have only two. Dark and light still existed, still snarled, still negotiated with teeth bared. But the fort was proof that something else could exist too, something stubborn and legally protected. On a winter evening, Damir stood on the fort wall and stared out at the fog. He was tall for his age, hair dark like Liana's, eyes pale like Aristarh's, and when he turned his head, the torchlight caught his gaze in a way that unsettled even veteran guards. Liana joined him, cloak pulled tight. "You should not stare into fog like it owes you answers," she said. Damir's mouth curved faintly. "It does. The fog hides things. I do not like hidden things." Liana studied him. She had tried to teach him caution without teaching him fear. It was a difficult balance. Below the wall in the courtyard, a group of visiting light and dark envoys argued quietly about patrol boundaries. Their voices rose, tension building. Damir's gaze flicked down, and Liana saw something shift behind his eyes. He lifted his hand, palm outward, not in a gesture of command, but in a gesture of refusal. For a heartbeat, the arguing voices stopped. Not because they chose to stop. Because their instincts paused, as if the part of them that wanted to surge into pack behavior had been muted. The silence lasted only a minute, perhaps less, then the envoys blinked and resumed speaking, unsettled, quieter now. Liana's spine tightened. "Damir," she said sharply. "What did you do?" Damir looked at his own hand as if it surprised him. "I do not know," he admitted. "I felt the pull, the hive pull and the court pull, and I pushed it away." Liana's throat tightened. He can suppress calls, she thought. He can turn off collective instinct for a moment, a rare gift, a dangerous one. Behind them, a voice drifted from the stairwell. "A gift that will make rulers want him." Mavra emerged from shadow as if she belonged there, as if years had not changed her at all. Her eyes flicked to Damir, then to Liana, then to the fog. "You came without invitation," Liana said, voice cold. Mavra smiled thinly. "I come when the debt ripens." Liana's hands clenched. "I paid you." "You paid me memories," Mavra replied. "Memories do not rot, they ferment." Damir looked between them wary. Liana's voice stayed steady. "Speak." Mavra stepped closer, and the air smelled faintly of ash. "Your first bond memory," she said softly. "The one you sold me. It is not gone, it is traded. It may return." Liana's stomach tightened. "Return how?" Mavra's gaze sharpened. "As someone else's recollection." "As other people's memories," she said, using the old word deliberately, a word that made it sound like the memories would come back wearing someone else's face. "You may someday remember your first touch as if you were watching it from another mind." Liana felt cold spread through her. "Who?" Mavra's smile widened just enough to be cruel. "That depends on who buys it next." Damir's eyes narrowed. "Who would buy my mother's memory?" Mavra's gaze flicked to him. "Anyone who wants to steer a bond. Anyone who wants to bend a ruler. Anyone who wants to rewrite history without changing facts." Liana's throat tightened. "The hunters are gone." Mavra's smile stayed. Orders do not die. They change names. They learn patience. Liana looked out at the fog, and for a moment the marsh looked like the city had years ago, a place where disappearances had begun with clean traces and bitter metal scent. She placed a hand on the wall stone, feeling the fort's wards hum under her palm, feeling the bond thread in her chest pulse faintly, feeling her child beside her with his strange, quieting power. "Then we will be ready," Liana said. Mavra's eyes glittered. That is all anyone ever says before the next trap. And the fog kept its secrets, waiting for the day someone decided to buy a memory and sell it back as war. Do you think lying to a loved one is justified if it, in your opinion, saves their life, or is total trust more important than safety? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.